I knew him through my late husband, Bill, who was also a photographer. And they were both members of the Photo League. That was an organization for photographers in New York City. In those days, photographers were not honored the way they are today. And photographs were not, they were not, just a moment, that's why I have this, because sometimes I can't remember certain names. Copyright. You couldn't copyright photos. Let's say in those days, if Ken was hired by an ad agency to take a certain picture to be printed, he would hand in the roll and he would get paid, and that's it. And if the agency ran that picture many, many times, as they did, there were no residuals and there was no payment. It was a very bad situation. It was very hard to make a living as a photographer unless, you know, you were at the very top. But that changed. You don't mind if I digress a little bit, as this is close to my heart. I had a career as a photographer myself. This all reached sort of the breaking point when certain well-known painters started to use photos in their work. Andy Warhol, Rauschenberg, Lichtenstein, all these people used photos that other photographers had taken and incorporated them in their work, and they were paid thousands and millions of dollars, and the photographer who took the original photos didn't get a cent. And that was too much. And at that point, I think in the 60s, finally the Congress bestirred itself and extended copyright to photography. Yay! Anyway, Smith was at that time, when I met him, the president of the Photo League. The government did not like that group. They thought it was a bunch of radicals, and the Attorney General, this was during the McCarthy period, declared the Photo League a, not communist, well, whatever, a subversive organization, and they had to close down. But Smith and all the other photographers, of course, were upset, and they remained upset until the copyright law was passed. But I want to talk about him in Croton. I met him at Phelps Hospital, where one of his children was sick, and in the same room as my daughter, Amy. So we were visiting Amy, and Smith was there visiting his daughter, Juanita. And we got to talking because we had something in common, Bill and I, and Eugene Smith. That's about the extent of how well I knew him, but I thought I'd mention it. He's famous, of course, for inventing the idea of photo essays. That is, several photos, or many photos about a certain subject, and they should be published together. He had big tussles with Life magazine because Life magazine did publish a lot of his photo essays, but they edited them and didn't use more than maybe half a dozen or so. But they're very famous, and you may even know them. The Country Doctor, the Spanish Village, Albert Schweitzer in Africa. There are many, many more. The coal miners in Wales. He had what's called a social conscience. He was very involved, as so many artists were, with the injustices in society. And I guess that's why the Attorney General didn't like the photo leak. As a man, I don't know. He did leave his family and went to live in Manhattan with another woman. And his wife was a nurse, had to raise the children on her own. They originally lived in one of the stone houses, and he, as a matter of fact, created another photo essay about his daughter Juanita in that building. You can see the children ran wild and there was graffiti all over the walls. Next, Vera Neumann. Oh, there. When she graduated from art school and wanted to go into clothes design, she wanted to be a clothing designer. This was in World War II, and there weren't fabrics. Only silk. You could get silk because silk was manufactured for parachutes. Parachutes were needed in the war for the Air Force, the Air Corps, I should say. So you could buy silk, and that's why her business became Scarves by Vera. They were silk scarves, beautifully, in beautiful colors. She used orange and green and blue, and she was very creative with her colors. And that business after the war then grew tremendously. She then designed clothes, she designed bed linen and table linen and all kinds of things. And it was a big business. She had a studio in Arsening where she employed kids from Croton, young people, their first jobs. And she and her husband they made a lot of money. Okay, good for her. She and her husband, George, commissioned Marcel Breuer, the famous immigrant architect, to design a house for them on Finney Farm, which he did, and it's one of his most famous and most beautiful, I think. And that's where they lived, and that's where I met her when she hosted a fundraising event for the Democratic Party.
The business is still going, Vera. But there is still a Vera business, accessories.
Yeah, it still exists somewhere. It's been bought by various people. She was a close friend of Alexander Calder, who as a boy, of course, lived at the foot of Finney Farm in one of the stone houses where his father, also a sculptor, lived, and Alexander was a boy who went through the Croton schools. And I bet you're going to feature him one of these days.
We will.
He's internationally famous. Lorraine Hansberry. Now, everybody here knows about her, so I don't really have to say a lot, because the Hansberry Coalition has done a fantastic job in bringing her writings, her personality, her history, her political aspects, her sexuality, all of this to the public. She's been made a great subject for study by this coalition. I bet you there's some people here who belong to that
We do have.
coalition. Oh, yes, okay. And everybody knows that she's buried in our Bethel Cemetery. And I bet you that everybody has seen either the play or the film of A Raisin in the Sun, the only great play that has lasted, and a wonderful, wonderful piece of work which brought to many white people in this country the first time something about how black people live and what they think. It was it created a big stir. This is a long time ago. Now she was active in many causes, and the first time I saw her was at Temple Israel, where they had rented the temple for a big rally for fundraising for the young activists, civil rights activists who were going to go south and enroll black citizens into the voting registers, which then was a very iffy thing. And it was something I was looking forward to, but I became sick. I was terribly sick, but I didn't want to miss it. So I dragged myself across the street to the temple, and I dragged my children with me. I wanted them to be at this event. They were still little, but Amy, my oldest daughter, remembers the event, and she's a live witness. Lorraine Hansberry was a mesmerizing speaker. She was young, she was well, she was energetic, and she was like someone on fire. I mean, she could, make everybody get up and say yes. And it raised a lot of money. Incidentally, some of the money was used to buy a car for the three activists who went to Mississippi and were murdered there. And one of them was Andy Goodman. My husband, Bill Croton, was his teacher at the Walden School. So it was more than a political event, it was a personal loss that we've never quite gotten over with. The other time when I saw her I was trying to earn a little money. I had these 3 kids, and we had very little money. We were trying to build a house. And I saw an ad in the Croton News about delivering telephone books. So I signed up right away. Of course, all the smart people took the routes through apartment houses and streets with lots of houses. And I was a total greenhorn. I wound up in the backwoods of the town of Cortland with houses here and then maybe there. And I had to drive from one house to the next to deliver telephone books at 7 cents a book. Yeah, that's how much I earned, actually not. The gas, I think, was more than the fee for the books. But when I came to the house where Lorraine Hansberry lived, I approached and two huge dogs were making a big noise inside the house. There were glass panels, I could see them. They were barking and baring their teeth. It was horrible. I'm afraid of dogs anyway. I clasped those telephone books and kind of came a little closer. And all of a sudden, there was Lorraine Hansberry in a robe. She calmed down the dogs and opened the door, and I stepped forward and handed her the books. And I said, "I love your play." And she gave me a smile, so beautiful. She was a beautiful woman. What a smile. The sun came out. She was very thin and looked ill. She was ill, and she died not long thereafter. But that's my story about Lorraine Hansberry.
All right.
Theodore Cornu. Now there's another really sweet, wonderful old man. We seem to have quite a few of those in Croton. When I was first living in Croton with 3 little kids, and I couldn't really become active until sometime later, but in the Croton Cortland Gazette, which was then published by A.A. Granovsky. Just a moment. Graduate of Harvard. Every time his name was mentioned in the paper, it said, Mr. A.A. Granovsky, graduate of Harvard, even when he was only pouring tea or something. It was a thing with him, and everybody did it. But he was an interesting man, and he employed a number of interesting writers. An archaeologist who signed his name as Audax, and Frida Haley, who was the social reporter and reported on people visiting and so forth. It was all still very sort of Victorian. Once in a while, A.A. Granovsky, graduate of Harvard, published pictures by somebody called Theodore Cornu. They were wonderful drawings of the Hudson, of the Indians who once lived here, the countryside. And I was wondering, who is this Theodore Cornu? Well, eventually I found out that he lived in the ferry house at the Van Cortlandt Manor, and he built canoes. He knew how to do that. He had learned it from the Indians. He had an Indian girlfriend, and he had studied her language. He was really the first environmentalist of this country, and his great love was the Hudson. He couldn't do enough for the Hudson. That was his real great love. By the time I tried to follow him and find out where he was so I could meet him, the Rockefellers had bought the Van Cortlandt Manor and were restoring it, and he had to leave the ferry house. And it turned out he lived on the estate of a niece in Greenwich, Connecticut. It's kind of unlikely, but that's what it was. So Bill and I got in the car and we drove there to find him. He lived in a Quonset hut on a lawn of his niece's estate. But unfortunately, the niece was about to divorce her husband, and the estate had to be sold. So Cornu, who was then close to 100, wound up finally in a home upstate. But he did come here one more time. Ed Ronsall, who also belonged to a canoeing club, was Cornu and others. There was a big thing at one time. People from New York got in canoes and paddled up to Croton and so forth. They had picnics and they had events along the way. Well, he brought him when we celebrated the 100th anniversary of the incorporation of the village of Croton. Not the 125th, but the 100th. Do you remember it? And Ed brought Cornu with him, and people were astounded that he was still alive. I think he was over 100 by then, and completely deaf. But what a great artist, and what a great person. What a wonderful lover of nature. If you joined him and promised to take care of the Hudson, he made you an echo, a Hudson River echo. He gave you a certificate and sent you an echo. You're echoing his campaign to save the Hudson from all the things that were impinging on it. Right. Lillian Nordica, I'm so glad that you included her because she's been practically completely forgotten. Even opera lovers don't remember her. She was the first American singer to achieve international fame. She sang the Wagnerian repertoire, all those ladies in these outfits, all over Europe where she was celebrated. She made tons of money. She was a star. She also sang at the Metropolitan Opera.
Can we go and guys sing together? Can we go?
At one time,
Yeah.
she linked up with Colonel Harmon, who was then the biggest real estate investor in this country. He had already created all kinds of developments and communities, and he and she teamed up together to make Harmon, the big piece of land he bought from the Van Cortlandt family, which we now call Harmon, into a huge American Bayreuth. It was going to have a huge opera house, dormitories for the students. She was going to teach all the things that go with a big opera house, the costumes and everything. This was a huge development, all in Harmon. Can you imagine? Well, it takes money to do things like that. And Colonel Harmon tried his best in this country, and she went to Europe and tried to raise money there, and both failed. Nothing came of these plans. And their affection for each other cooled. But I always almost cry when I think of Lillian Nordica, because this is an example of the kind of life that is so sad. She had the world at her feet, and yet she had no luck with men. Her first husband was a Hungarian balloonist who disappeared over the English Channel. There were other failed marriages, and then one of the later ones spent all her money. And that had a lot to do with the way she had to live the rest of her life. She now had to raise money. And the only way she could do that was to go on a world tour and sing in various places to raise money. She was middle-aged at that time. She got as far as California and Australia. But the ship that was to bring her from Australia to the Asian mainland foundered. The passengers had to be rescued, and she died of exposure on Borneo Island. Her life would make a good libretto for an opera, don't you think? However, the sad part is that she fell into oblivion and people didn't remember her anymore, and she disappeared for many, many years. Nobody knew anything about her. One time, Bill and I went to the Metropolitan Opera, and we were early, so we decided to take a walk in the hallways and galleries that they have where they exhibit pictures of the famous composers and conductors and singers. And it was very enlightening. We still had more time. We went down into the basement and toured that. There was still more time. We went to the sub-basement. In the sub-basement, I came to a complete halt in front of a painting. There was Lillian Nordica, who once had the world at her feet in the sub-basement of the Metropolitan Opera. It was such a shock. And this was all that was left of her, except for Nordica Drive. I'm so glad you're including her. She needs a revival. Okay, Mabel Dodge. Is she here? Oh, yeah. Yes. Mabel Dodge was a very wealthy woman who didn't quite know what to do with her money, but she thought she would support the arts. Good for her. She had inherited money. She had divorced a wealthy husband or two, and she had all that money. She had a salon on Lower Fifth Avenue where she entertained lavishly, and everybody who was anybody went there. She had a huge crowds of friends and followers, and ex-lovers, current lovers, and future lovers. And she was very generous with her money. She supported some artists who had no money. She supported the famous Armory show, which introduced European modern art to this country before World War I. And she paid for the reenactment in Madison Square Garden of the Patterson silk strike, which I think was written by her then lover, John Reed. This was a big thing, but it was a flop, but it cost tons of money. Nothing was as good as the original strike of the workers in Patterson when artificial fibers came in, the silk industry collapsed. And these people became unemployed. And that's why there was a big strike, and it was violent, and some people were hurt, and the police were very brutal. And just to add a personal note, my husband's father, who was a worker in the silk mills, was thrown in a holding cell with 60 other people. One of them was John Reed, who was there as a reporter, and he reported about the Thousand Silk Strike, which was a big event.
Didn't she?
Mabel,
What about Fitzgerald? Fitzgerald, the writer. Didn't she help them out?
Fitzgerald, the writer. Didn't she help
Scott. You mean F. Scott Fitzgerald?
well,
F. Scott Fitzgerald. Oh, I'm sorry.
well, I'll take you up on that later. Where was I? Yes. When World War I broke out, Mabel, like many people, decided to leave New York City. Nobody knew what would happen during the war. They wanted away from the city and live peacefully in the country. She came to Croton and leased Finney Farm. You know, that beautiful farmhouse and all the beautiful outer buildings. That's where she lived. She brought with her all these hangers-on, and one of her husbands, Maurice Durham, was with her. He incidentally was the first American artist to have a one-man show at the Museum of Modern Art, which was also a brand new museum then. But she wrote a book, and she's known more as a supporter of the arts than an artist herself. But she wrote a book that's very entertaining, and the chapter on Croton is very instructive. Maurice, like all the previous husbands, left and went to New Mexico, to Taos. From there he wrote heartbreaking letters about the disappearance of the cultural treasure of the American Indians, because rich collectors were grabbing what they could. You must come and help preserve the art of the American Indian. And she did. And she did go there and founded a museum. And then she married an American Indian there who was already married, but never mind. And his name was Tony Lujan, and he couldn't speak English, but that marriage lasted. So that's Mabel Dodge.
All right.
I think one more.
Edna St. Vincent Millay will do it.
Oh, yes. Oh, I could never forget her. Edna St. Vincent Millay. And I meant to say that you know, Mabel Dodge's spirit sort of hovers over Finney Farm, and William Nordica's spirit hovers over Harmon. But Edna St. Vincent Millay's spirit definitely hovers over Mount Airy. Her quest for beauty, which she of course reached with her exquisite poetry. She was also very reckless. in her private life. And progressive, if not radical, in her political views. She fought for women's rights. This is of course before the
Talk a little louder, your
19th
voice is,
Amendment.
talk a little louder if you can, so they can hear you.
They can't hear me?
Well, you're getting softer and softer.
Yeah, well, sorry. She had friends in Croton, fellow women's rights activists, especially Doris Stevens, who was jailed several times, as a matter of fact, for her activities. It was not easy being a so-called suffragette. People, they were beaten, they were jailed. She was jailed. She wrote a book called Jailed for Freedom. And she came up, she lived in Greenwich Village, where many of the Croton artists also lived. For many of them, Croton was a year-round place, but for others it was a summer place. And their real address was in Greenwich Village. So they went back and forth all the time. And she came to a party at Doris's house where they were playing charades. And she met a tall, good-looking man. And they fell in love and they decided to get married. That was Eugene Boissevin, a wealthy Dutch businessman who had previously been married to Ines Milholland, one of the most beautiful of the suffragettes, who rode in a parade on a white horse in a white gown at the head of the parade. At the day before the inauguration of President Wilson, on whom the women activists counted that he would give them the right to vote, but he didn't. It had to wait another few years until the 19th Amendment was passed. He had rented what we now call the Elvin House. There are people living in it, I don't know their name, but where Francie Elvin used to live, at the top of Mount Airy with a fantastic view all the way to New York City. That's where they were married, and then spent the summer here in Croton. She was not hailed as one of the new revolutionary poets because she stuck to older forms of poetry, but they're achingly beautiful. She wrote over 150 sonnets, and you know how difficult it is to write a good sonnet. It's been done a few times, you know, by Shakespeare and by Shelley and Keats, but she is the great American sonnet writer, and I recommend them to you.
Cornelia, we're gonna have to.
This is it.
We're gonna have to move along.
Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. Gloria Jean, would you?
I won't take myself. Okay. Well, just for a few minutes, I'll talk a little bit about Jerry.
No, please.
We moved to Croton in 1970. Right? Jerry was, as Cornelia said, a very gentle, very kind, and loving man. He was also a very hard worker. I met Jerry in high school at a Valentine's dance. All right. When I was a junior, he was a senior. The first time I ever saw him, he had his sleeves rolled up like he was ready to work. He had a big drawing board under his arm, and he had a pencil behind his ear. And he knew what he wanted to do. He knew he wanted to be an artist.
Say the name again,
Jerry Pinckney. That was right there, right in the center. All right. Jerry illustrated more than 100 books for children. He also illustrated for adults. He always also illustrated books for Franklin Library. He also did magazines. He did advertising. He did the first of the Black Heritage Series, the first 8 stamps. Then he was on the Stamp Advisory Committee and he was responsible for the artists who took on the work after him. He did work for the White House. When the World Trade Center came down, Laura Bush got in touch with Jerry and had him come to Washington, and he put together something for the Visitor Center. CBS Sunday Morning came to our house, interviewed Jerry, interviewed me, because I'm also a writer. Also, I want to say, not only was Jerry an illustrator, he was a writer also. And matter of fact, his Just Jerry book is in the stores right now. It's the story of how he grew up and how he became a famous artist. We have a family of artists. Our children are artists. We have a photographer. We have another illustrator. Our granddaughter, Charnel Pinckney Barlow, already has 8 children's books herself. Our son Brian has over 50. He's married to a writer, Andrea Davis Pinckney, and Andrea is not only an editor, but she's also a writer. And let's see, what else can I say about Jerry? Oh, he won numerous awards. He was very humble. He never hung up any of his awards. Our attic is full of all kinds of awards. He won a Lifetime Achievement Award from the Norman Rockwell Museum, and Laura Bush made a trip to be there and to present him with that award. Jerry was the first illustrator to have a show at the Norman Rockwell Museum. Before that time, there had never been another illustrator other than Rockwell who had been illustrated, there, who had a show there, and he was very much alive at that time. It's been 3 years since Jerry passed. And his books are still selling, thank you God. And so is his art. He wanted all of his art to go into museums, and so that's what's happened. Books have been given to museums around the country. He also has a painting hanging in the Philadelphia Museum of Art, which is quite wonderful, and that was an honor, that happening. When he won the Caldecott Award for 4 times before, 4 silver before he got the gold for The Lion and the Mouse. What can I say about that? When that happened, when The Lion and the Mouse came out, and we're both from Philadelphia, we went to Philadelphia, and image of the lion was on all the buses in Philadelphia, and we didn't know that. That was like quite an honor to just come into town and all of a sudden to see that happening. What else? We traveled to several different countries, as far as Russia, where he showed in Russia, and we both were in Russia and got to speak there. Hawaii, Paris, we did a lot. We did a lot. We were married 61 years, married together 64, because 3 years in high school. What else?
All right. That's good. Andy?
I'll try to be brief. I'm not known for being brief, but I will try, because it's about that time. My name's Andy Farber. I've been living in Croton since 2012. But I first was here probably in 1969, 1970, because my father's best friend lived on Nordica, actually, in that Mikado Hotel, the stone building, right? And before they moved to Long Island. And also in the 60s, my Uncle Mitchell lived up here. He was a pacifist, did not want to be drafted, so he was in treatment with Dr. Samuel Kahn. Does anyone know about Dr. Kahn? You knew about Dr. Kahn. I'm sure I was going to ask you about that. So Dr. Kahn said, well, if you stay in treatment with me, we'll get you out of the Army, And so we do have some family connections to Croton, and then I ended up moving here in 2012. I knew that Manny Album, who was, I met in 1984. He was a mentor and a teacher of mine and a great educator. Actually, I want to make a side little note and a callback about Lillian Nordica, because frequently, or from time to time, musicians are asked to perform for very little money, with the promise that this will be good exposure. But as we've just learned, you could die from exposure. So you got to be careful of those things. But Manny, I played the saxophone, and Manny had been a saxophone player, actually born in the Dominican Republic. I think that's where the boat went when they were coming from Eastern Europe, and so he was born there. But I think he grew up in the New York area and worked as a professional musician starting in the 40s with large jazz ensembles that, well, I guess it's sort of like the tail end of the swing era. He worked with, if you know the names, like Charlie Barnett and his orchestra, or Georgie Auld. And he met a saxophone player who was a composer arranger named Bud Johnson, who happened to be one of my first teachers. Bud would be, if you're a fan of jazz history, a contemporary of Lester Young, Ben Webster, Coleman Hawkins, around that era. And Bud started giving Manny his first lessons in orchestrating and arranging and composition, and that became Manny's livelihood. He kind of put the saxophone away and worked as a composer, which, you know, it's very difficult to make a living composing original music. So orchestrating and arranging for other people. And of course, in the 1950s, there was a lot of records being made, and there were radio broadcasts, and of course, television was new. And one of Manny's first commercial jobs was writing arrangements for Sid Caesar's show. I don't know whether it was the Show of Shows or Caesar's Hour after that, but in those days, you know, if you did 36 to 39 hour shows a week, that's a lot of music to write with a live orchestra. They weren't pre-recording things. So he was going through pencils and paper pretty good, you know, during that era. And when the record business was hot, he would write for a lot of other instrumentalists and singers. If anyone knows Marilyn May, who's a jazz/cabaret Broadway singer, she's 95 now. She still sounds great. She plays all the time in the city, and I think she has the record of being the singer on Johnny Carson's Tonight Show more than anyone else. It's also significant because I don't think she ever did the show in Burbank. So in the first 10 years that Carson was doing the Tonight Show, she was on like 80 times or something like that, very often playing Manny's orchestrations. But as the record business started to change in the 1970s, and jazz and swing were taking a back seat to different styles, he got into education, starting with a regular teaching job at, I think it's called Glassboro State University, New Jersey, which is a bit of a schlep from here. Actually, I think in those days he was living on the wrong side, the other side of the river in Nyack, and would drive down there. But in 1984, I met him in Glassboro, and a few years later, I went to the Manhattan School of Music, and by that point, Manny was teaching at Manhattan School of Music, and in 1987, he and a colleague, another great composer, arranger, trombonist called Bob Brookmeyer, they started a workshop for professional jazz musicians who wanted to hone their skills as composers and arrangers. And it's free if you get into the workshop because it's funded by BMI, which is, so you probably know, if you don't, it's a performing rights organization that collects the royalties for composers from broadcasting. And live performances also. There's also ASCAP, very similar, you've probably heard of that. So BMI stands for Broadcast Music Incorporated, or if you ask Bob Brookmeyer, it stood for Boy is Manny Incompetent, which is because Manny wasn't the greatest conductor. Although, actually, in a way, he was a fantastic conductor, because even though sometimes his hand movements would be nebulous and hard to follow, the best thing a conductor can do is to communicate with the musicians in the orchestra and extract a great performance out of it, to be inspiring, and that, Manny was great. So he would meet with composers weekly to examine their compositions and give advice. And once a month they would do a reading session with a live orchestra for the composers that Manny would conduct. And he probably led that workshop for about 10 or 15 years until he got ill, and Manny died in 2001. He was born in 22, so he didn't quite make 80. And somewhat coincidentally, that workshop is still around today, and I'm the director of the workshop, which is unrelated to knowing Manny. It's sort of coincidental. But Croton sort of figures into that, because by then he was living on Glengarry, married to Betty Hines, the artist who Cornelia mentioned earlier. And there was another jazz musician who lived here in the 80s, is a good friend of mine named Ted Nash, and when I took over the workshop, Ted was my associate director. So now that makes 3 people from Croton leading the BMI workshop. And then maybe 6 or 7 years ago, Ted was so busy with touring, he couldn't continue with the workshop, so I enlisted a friend of mine named Alan Ferber. Okay, it's confusing because I'm Andy Farber and Alan Ferber, and Alan lived here. I thought it was going to be a good carpooling opportunity. He now lives in Nyack, where Manny used to live. So now there's history will say that 4 people that lived in Croton have something to do with this workshop. Completely coincidental. I just thought I'd mention it for more pile on with the Croton trivia kind of thing. But Manny found, they say there are no second acts in American lives, but Manny certainly had one, from being a great composer arranger to also being a very respected and beloved educator. And it's really not easy to teach. A lot of you probably are educators, and you may know a lot of stuff, but to transfer your knowledge and experience to someone else in a way that they begin to grok and understand what you know is a different kind of skill that you can't necessarily learn. And Manny had that gift. He was able to explain to you things that he knew. And after that, you were like, oh, well, yeah, right? Which doesn't happen frequently. So I'll always be grateful for Manny for his experience and wisdom, and setting a great example as an educator and following in his footsteps to some small degree as a composer, arranger. Also, he had the greatest mustache in the music business, which the photograph would actually is. I have nothing else because I didn't prepare notes.
Very good.
I probably
very
should have, but so.
Linda, you want to?
If anyone wants to tell me about Dr. Khan, I would always be interested in that, because my parents would frequently come up here in the 60s and early 70s, and they would be in some sort of big group thing with Samuel Khan, and then they would do this weird table tapping thing. My mother still talks about it, She's 83, but she would say, oh yeah, we used to go to Quaker Bridge to Dr. Khan's, and we would do table tapping. All right, anyone knows Dr. Okay, I have no more Croton trivia.
Thank you, Andy.
I want to speak for the Lorraine Hansberry Coalition. There's quite a few of us here tonight. Linda's here, Alex is here, Kathleen is here, Carl's here, and Duane is Chris. And so we were formed in 2021. We're a volunteer group supported by the village. Linda is one of the co-chairs along with Signy Bergstrom. So you can ask us questions later, but a lot of you already know about what we do. And then Cornelia, of course, did a fabulous job of reminding us about the life of Lorraine Hansberry. But what's really exciting is we have upcoming band events October 4th and 5th. So you want to get those on your calendar. It's about what we're calling the Mighty, what are we calling it? Triumvirate. You don't want to get it wrong. So Lorraine Hansberry was friends with James Baldwin, with Nina Simone. And so the 3 of them grouped together gives us a really great opportunity to explore further what they believed in, what ideas they were sharing, activism, music, art. And so that's going to be really exciting. And it's being also done in conjunction with the I don't want to get the name wrong, Ken's group. What do you guys call yourselves again? Arts and Humanities. Arts and Humanities, especially supporting us on the music end. So hopefully we'll see you at those events on October 4th and 5th.
All right, thank you.
I
Yes.
just wanted to mention one person that was not included,
Who's that?
and that was Jessie Norman. Jessie Norman lived here in Croton.
Yes, she did.
For many years.
And
Opera singer, famous opera singer.
she will likely be an honoree.
Okay.
Bree, would you tell us about this amazing process, how this came to be?
I'm on the Arts and Humanities Commission here in Croton. I've been here on Furnace Dock Road down by the water since 2013. And I have a company in Peekskill, New York, about 10 minutes north, where we make art machines. We make machines that help artists make art. And we've got one here. I'll turn it back on once we stop talking, and we can get into those grapes. Let's do some damage on that. We really want, one of the great things about Croton is it has this just deep, rich history of artists. And it's not just like from the McCarthy area when they were escaping New York. It's like, it goes deep. So one of the challenges when we came up with this was we were like, we want to put banners up so folks can see and feel pride in the artistic spirit of our community. And we made a list of names, and we were like, we are going to show up at this event, and people are going to tell us who we missed, and it's going to be our jobs to write them down so that we can do this again next year. If you have names that we missed, number one, tell us so that we can do them justice, and we'll go from there. But one of the challenges was getting all these really varied. Some of these were black and white. Some of these were pretty rough early photos to start with, and make them all look unified, like they're all connected, like they belong together. And so I used a technique where each one of these drawings has 5 pens, a super light blue, a pastel blue, a light blue, a regular blue, a navy blue, and black. And I use one of these kind of like standard G2 pens. And if you look close at it, you can see they sort of look like black and white photos here. But I encourage you to get up close. You'll see that it's a drawing. And I'm just so pleased to have you all here, partially because I've been working on this for a long time to get them all set up and ready, and I'm really pleased with how they look here. And because it's all just like superstar after superstar. And then Maple Street. Oh my gosh, you come up Maple Street from the post office, and it's like Croton artists, like 1, 2, 4. It's like it's a powerhouse of artists coming up Maple Street. So I'm happy to answer questions about art machines. I'm happy to answer questions about the process, and I dug into the artists a little bit. I mean, Cornelia, I really like. We all get to know. We can see the pictures and we can hear what they did, but hearing from someone who knew so many of these people is just such a gift for all of us to feel deeply more connected to the artists and to the place we live. So thank you all for coming. I think that kind of wraps it up for the talking part. Let's eat those grapes.
Got one more. Len Simon.
Okay.
Len Simon, please
Sorry, not at all.
say a word or two for
I feel humble following Cornelia and Andy and Bree and Gloria as well. And it reminds me of the Golda Meir line where she said, "Don't be so humble. Don't be so humble. You're not that good." But I did want to say one word or two about Cornelia, just for a second. Now, Cornelia is not one of our banners, as you know, but we are going to honor her in a different way. We have a special committee that honors people who have done great things for Croton over the years, and Cornelia is our next honoree on September 21st at 2 p.m. in our municipal building. This wonderful woman who has curated all of the art in our municipal building, we will be hanging a portrait of her. And I hope you'll all join us. So, good evening. I am Len Simon, your deputy mayor. It's a nice job. It's like being half a mayor. Mayor Brian Pugh hoped to be here tonight, but he's on travel and wasn't able to join us. Asked me to say a few words, which I'm happy to do. I don't usually get very political in comments like this, but there is one observation I'd like to make. The present administration in Washington has hijacked the Kennedy Center, tried to shut down the National Endowment for the Arts and the National Endowment for the Humanities, has defunded PBS and NPR, and is trying to take over both the Smithsonian and the Library of Congress. So what does this all mean? It means when it comes to art, culture, and humanities in America, Croton is really all you got. And that's why I'm so glad to be here with you tonight. On April 29th, 1962, during a White House dinner honoring all of that year's Nobel Prize winners, President John F. Kennedy said, "I think this is the most extraordinary collection of talent, of human knowledge that there has ever been gathered together at the White House, with the possible exception of when Thomas Jefferson dined alone." So channeling JFK, as I look out tonight and see who's here, your creativity, your accomplishments, I can truly say that this is the most extraordinary collection of talent that has ever been gathered together at the Black Cow since Ken Sargent sipped coffee alone. Ken, your leadership has been inspiring and has made tonight possible. Please put your hands together also for Mr. Bree Pettis. Where's Bree? Really been a force behind tonight's celebration, and of course, where's Sherry? Sherry Horowitz, right there. Sherry, who I worked with on our board of trustees for 6 years. Sherry put her considerable heart and soul and time and energy into this project. And where's my friend Orit Daly? When Orit came in earlier today, I said, "Orit, this is wonderful. What a wonderful celebration we're going to have tonight." She said, "Well, I'm really a newer member of the committee. I didn't do all that much." And I said, "Orit, you're so talented. You must have done something." And she said, "Well, you know, we've put on a lot of receptions at Croton River Artisans." And so I told them one of the important secrets of success of a good reception is to have grapes. You know, because you can eat them with one hand, they're not messy, people like them. But also, for those of you that don't know, and I was privileged to be there, about a month or so ago, Orit Daly, for her work both as an artist and as a member of our Jewish community here in Croton, was honored by our state senate in Albany during Jewish American Heritage Week, and I was there as Senator Harcum presented the award. So let's hear it for Orit. Anyway, President Kennedy also said this about the arts in our communities. "I look forward to an America which will reward achievement in the arts as we reward achievement in business or statecraft. I look forward to an America which will steadily raise the standards of artistic accomplishment and which will steadily enlarge cultural opportunities for all of our citizens. And I look forward to an America which commands respect throughout the world, not only for its strength, but for its civilization as well." He looked forward to that, and there is no better place to make that a reality than right here in Croton. As a young man, I got to work very closely with a great figure in our American history, the magnificent Maynard Jackson, the first black mayor of Atlanta. During his tenure as mayor of Atlanta, he strongly championed funding for the arts. One of his most significant initiatives in support of public art was the implementation of a, quote, 1% for art program. This policy, enacted by the City Council in 1977, stipulated that 1% of the budget for all new city buildings and other projects be allocated for the commissioning and installation of public artwork. And if you go to Atlanta, you can see the results of the 1% for Art program. Now, that might be interesting for us to explore here in Croton, but that's just one example of what a community dedicated to the arts can do. And there are so many other examples of policies which we can look to for promoting the arts here in Croton. So I think we can continue this process that begins tonight. 2 weeks ago, I had the opportunity to take a great mayor from around the country on a tour of Croton to show him some of the things that we're doing. He served in office 28 years and has received almost every arts-related award that a mayor can receive. As we went around the Upper Village and I showed him what we had here and what was coming, he said to me, quote, "This is your arts and entertainment district. Nights like this and the month that will follow will help make these beautiful banners that are adorning our streets that possible to consider." let's be clear, celebrating our art history honors the past, but it's not about the past. It's really about the future. I often talk about building the Croton of tomorrow, and that's a Croton that honors its past, but knows its most important responsibility is building a community for the generations to come. I like to say we divide our work into 3 categories: our everyday work, our continuous improvement, and our breakthrough efforts. What you all have done tonight here and on Maple Street, which my wife Linda and I just went up and down right before we got here, is really one of our breakthrough efforts, and I can't thank you enough for doing that. With everything that you've accomplished tonight and this breakthrough effort, you will help lead us into the Croton of tomorrow. I have to say, having listened to everyone previously, I never met any of these folks, but I know that in this room tonight are the Croton banners of the future, and I look forward to you being hoisted that way many, many years from now. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Lynn. Well, I think that concludes the organized portion of the program, such as it is. And mix and mingle, make some new friends, and enjoy this marvelous art. Thank you.